Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give everybody just a minute to get logged in here, and then we'll get started. We're very glad that you're here with us. As we wait for everybody to get logged in, I did want to just let you know that if you have questions or as we go through this presentation, we love your feedback. We love your interaction. So please don't hesitate to use the Q&A feature. We will save time at the end to go through and answer questions. As I said, we do love that feedback. We do love that interaction. So I am Missy Gilliland. I'm the Director of Learning and Development here at SimiTree. As I said, we're very glad you guys could join us today. We have an exciting webinar for you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy and Cami to get us started. I will be putting the handout in the chat here in just a few minutes. So you can be on the lookout for that. But as you have questions, please use the Q&A. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cami to introduce herself, and then she'll hand it over to Christy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Missy. I'm Cami Mueller. I am a senior manager on the growth solutions team at SimiTree. I am a nurse by background and have had almost all my nursing experience in the post-acute care space, and happy to be here with all of you. And looking forward to going through all of the exciting things that we're going to talk about this afternoon and morning for those of you on the West Coast. So I'll hand it over to you, Christy.
Thanks, Cami. Thanks, Missy. I can't believe that it's well, here I am on the West Coast. It's 9 o'clock already. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, it's December already. Time flies. We're, like Cami said, we're really glad to be with you today. My name's Christy Lang. I am the Director of Data Consulting here at SimiTree. I have been working all of my career in post-acute care, senior services data specifically. Was lucky enough to grow up with the advent of Oasis and PPS. Some of you may not see that as lucky. I find it fascinating because I love all of the data that we can collect, and I love seeing us expand the way we think about using data to solve problems and drive our professions forward, the world of home health and hospice, and think about how we provide care better, how we optimize the use of our short staff, like our limited staff, our limited time, and how we think about being successful at businesses, at the business side of things, so that we can continue to provide services to clients. So also really glad to be with you today, and glad to be talking about this topic as we are quickly approaching 2023. So our agenda for today is fairly straightforward. We're really going to talk about two primary topics. We want to start by addressing the unique challenges of 2023, because they really do influence the way that we're thinking about the next year. We're always seeing challenges in our industries. We're always seeing things shift, but 2023 really does present a unique combination. And as we've been working with clients, and as we've been thinking about what our clients are going through this particular year, we're really thinking about tweaking baseline strategies or best practice strategies to be specific to meet the needs of this particular moment. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means when we think about it going forward, just to set that baseline. And then we're going to talk about growth strategies given the environment. Again, it's not necessarily rocket science, but it's thinking about those basic best practices, those foundational elements of good business management, but slightly focused given the needs of this particular year. And then throughout that conversation, we're going to show you how the market analysis platform, a product that SimiTree introduced in the first quarter of 2023, really makes it easy to get to the data that we see as really critical for making strong decisions and prioritizing your time effectively. I will say, as we launch into this, that the market analysis platform, or MAP, isn't the only source of market data. And whether you choose to learn more about MAP and work with us to acquire market intelligence through MAP with us, or you have another source of that market intelligence, we hope that this conversation gives you some food for thought around how this data can be really essential in making the most successful plans for 2023. So challenges really in 2023, we're going to talk about both home health and hospice. Hospice overlaps with some of these challenges, but home health has an extra couple of layers of what's going on. And so some of these challenges are going to be specific to home health. First of all, Oasis E. If you've kind of been pushing that off and not thinking too much about it, Oasis E does present a significant shift in the way we think about capturing patient information within the home health world. I know we've had several changes to Oasis over the past couple of decades. This one introduces some new concepts in capturing patient information that are a deviation from what we've done in the past. So if you haven't thought about it before, now is a good time to do that, because of course Oasis E comes into play on January 1st. And we expect there to be some friction, if you will, as our clinicians start capturing this information, and that may slow some things down. It may present some challenges in the way we're capturing information, the way we're submitting it, the way that business processes flow. Of course, we have payment rate changes. With 2023, we see CMS changing that base payment calculation for home health PDGM. That is luckily not as big of a decrease as we were expecting a few months ago, but still for a lot of organizations, it's going to present either a very minimal increase in payment that's not going to keep up with cost increases, or for a lot of organizations, it's actually going to present a decrease or an anticipated decrease in overall payment per care period. If you haven't thought about how payment rate changes are going to affect your organization specifically, if you haven't gotten any modeled data, please let us know. We actually have some information that we're happy to share with you that's specific to your agency around what you can expect to be coming your direction in terms of reimbursement changes in 2023. Cost pressure. If anyone's not feeling this today, you're lucky, but I think we all personally and professionally can see the effects of cost pressure, inflation, increasing expectations around salary, partially driven by staffing shortages and the fact that in a lot of our communities, we're having a hard time finding a full complement of team members to really staff what our agencies need. And that translates to some of those cost pressures as we're looking to increase the attractiveness of working for our organization through increased compensation packages. But even when sometimes increased compensation packages isn't solving that staffing shortage problem, and it's still a really tangible issue. So all this to say, Cami and I, as we were preparing today's content, we were like, it feels like every year we're saying it's more important than ever, or the changes are bigger than ever, more difficult than ever. But we come back to it, looking at 2023, it's more important than ever, given all of these industry dynamics, to be really thoughtful and deliberate and strategic with your business, including growth plans, which is the heart of today's conversation. So as we think about how those challenges translate to prioritization and prioritizing what we're really going to be paying attention to and how we think about driving business in 2023, two primary priorities that we're seeing is efficiency with staff time, both our clinical staff and our administrative and sales and marketing staff. There are only so many hours in the day. We only have so much money to pay for staff, so we really need to maximize the effectiveness of what they're doing. And we'll talk a little bit about how that comes into play in growth strategy plans in just a moment here. And potentially ensuring the right mix of patients, making sure that the patients that we're trying to get referrals for align with our staff's talents and skill set, aligns with the geographic territory that we have to provide care, aligns with payment that's going to make most sense given the financial demands of running a home health agency or a hospice. So some potential strategies. Again, this isn't starting from scratch, but this is building on strong foundational concepts. But it's maybe tweaking it just a little bit, thinking about the specifics of the moment of time that we're in. But potential strategies for really dealing effectively with 2023 challenges and these priorities that we see. One is to focus on strengthening best referral relationships. And we'll talk about what this means and why we put this as number one in just a moment. And number two is, if our best referral relationships, if our core market is in a good place, then to think about focusing expansion efforts. And again, we'll talk about the nuances of each of these kind of high level concepts as we go through the next half hour or so here. So Cami, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you. So love that. Looking forward to looking at those two different types of strategies. And so what happens for us at SimiTree is we have lots of agencies. We work with agencies across the country who reach out to us and want to talk about growing and expanding. And so many times what we hear are what you see here on the slide. So they want to add a service line to maybe they're just a home health agency and they want to add something else like hospice or palliative care, excuse me, or they want to expand their service area, open a new branch, want to look at where else near or maybe not so near to them they can expand their business. They think of growth just in that context only. And so really what happens is when you think about that growth just from that context only, it eliminates thinking about what you are currently doing in your market and what opportunities and operational opportunities you have within those markets that you're already in. What is your status as far as your market share and what the market dynamics are actually like within where you are currently already operating? And so on the next slide, we see an example of what we look at when we start to look at some of the market data. And again, as Christy said, this is an example from our market analysis platform that we use, but you can do this with any of the data solution providers that you might have. And so we first take a look at your primary market area. And maybe that's just one area. We look at it by county. It may be a grouping of counties depending on how large you are, but we want to look at your primary area, what the counties are, not necessarily every county that you have revenue in, but where you primarily are functioning and bringing in the most revenue at this current time. And so what's important to look at is what we have here. So we're looking at where your position is within that market. Again, it would be a county or a combination of counties. It may be several combinations of counties depending on how large you are. But again, getting a true idea of what you're considering a market within your service area, and then looking at not only the position that you have, but how much market share you have in that area. So here we have a great example of, excuse me, of an agency that was in the top, is still in the top position over the last 3 years, or the last 4 years, I'm sorry. And so we take a look at where they've stayed in first position, but they've lost some market share, actually 5% over those 4 years. And so very concerning, obviously. Want to dig in as to why we think that is, but as an organization, but also then looking at the rest of those competitors that we have in this specific market. What has been happening? Who has been moving? Where are the shifts, not only in share, but also in position, so that we can see what our competition is doing and what we need to be aware of as we start to strategically plan for that market. So you can see the agency in second position has maintained the 11% market share throughout the 4 years. But look at that agency now in third position in 2021, went from 4% in 2018 up to the 7% now in 2021. And so that could be a direct influence on the loss of market share from that first, the person in first position, if that's you. So you want to take a look at all of the different competitors that you have in that market and what's happening. We also see a little bit in 2019, not surprisingly, some sort of major shifting in some of the markets or some of the agencies that are in like position 8 and below. And so really, again, watching those to see if there are any mergers or acquisitions that may be affecting these numbers. And if not, what is happening with those, keeping an eye on those agencies to see what they're doing in the market, what you're hearing, what your liaisons and business development reps are hearing out in the market about those competitors and why the movements are happening. So very important to take a very detailed look at this from a high level perspective, but also from a very detailed view. So when we look at that, and we'll look at some more as we go into some of the other strategies that we're going to think about, we're going to look at some other types of data that will be important. But when we think about getting information about the current market that we have and what is happening there, not only with us, but with our competitors, we have to really decide, before we think about growing and expanding, have we gone back to the basics? Have we really maximized the current relationships that we have? And again, we are going to see some examples of relationships that facilities, both hospitals and skilled nursing facilities and physician groups, referral relationships that they have with agencies as we go along in the webinar today. And what we really want to see is what is happening with those current relationships. Do we need to increase the market share that we have within that relationship? Do we need to increase the market penetration that we have within that relationship? So, maybe we have a good referral relationship with one of those facilities or physician groups, but is it where it should be primarily percentage-wise? Or is it that they give us almost all of their referrals, but we know beyond the shadow of a doubt that there are many other patients that they have that could benefit from our services, but just don't realize that they can also refer them to us. So two very different strategies when we think about looking at our current market. Have we truly maximized our sales team? Are they making their true 10 to 15 sales calls a day? Are they truly looking at this data on a specific account and territory level? Do they have an understanding of those different referral partners and the potential that is involved with each of those? Do they have the proper training and technique to be able to ask for the referral at every visit? And then have we maximized collaboration with clinical operations? And so what does that actually look like? Not just communication as far as having time to touch base every day with operations to make sure that the sales team is going out and working with accounts where we can actually say yes because we have staff, but also really thinking about are we having common goals? Are we working together to have the most expedient response to those referrals? Are we all on the same page when we work together with our clinical operations team? So important to look at all of those things before we think about being able to expand, because sometimes an expansion, if those things aren't in place, can cause some significant barriers and problems. And so if we've looked at all of that, everything is strong, we've maximized all of these different aspects of that business, then what are we thinking about as far as some creative relationships possibly? So creative relationships, it's just infinite, the number of possibilities now that are out there with all of the different Medicare Advantage plans and payers. And so and hospital at home. And so when we think about all of those different things and how we can have those relationships, are those the things that we need to prioritize when we think about going back to the basics and looking at our own market first? So I'll pass it over to you, Christy, to start with those strategies.
All right. Well, let's talk about those two strategies in a little bit more detail. Cami just gave us an example that market share analysis. We blurred the names because it's from an actual engagement that we had where the client came to us and said, we know we're top in our market. We think we should be expanding through adding service lines or expanding to a new geographical territory. And the first thing we did was examine where they really are in their market. And we're like, yeah, you are top, but you've also lost some market share over the past few years. And we think that a better investment in the near term may be to really solidify your existing market and make sure that those are strategies that you can expand outward versus expanding outward at this point. Partially because keeping or defending your existing market, your existing referral sources, and growing that relationship, if possible, if there are additional referrals to receive from those referral sources, is really more cost effective than pursuing and developing new relationships. If you think about this translated to other businesses, you often hear how it's a lot more cost effective, a lot better from a purely financial perspective, better to really foster the existing client relationships that you have rather than trying to pursue new relationships, particularly if you haven't maxed out in that area. So if you have, that's a different equation, that's a different conversation where you're thinking about that new customer acquisition. But it's like thinking about remodeling your house. You don't want to put new rooms on your house if your foundation's crumbling, right? That's not going to give you the long-term home that you want. So let's focus on really making sure that we have a solid, safe foundation before building on those additional rooms. So from your perspective as a home health or hospice agency, what are the types of data that you want to investigate to really think about critically and deliberately about your existing relationships and the opportunity that you might have there? Some things that you might want to understand if you don't already is, what is your position with your referral sources today? And I will tell you on this one that the data on this can be really illuminating. We've talked to so many organizations who say we are the top receiver of referrals from this particular hospital or this particular medical group. And when we dig into the data, they may be the top receiver, but maybe they're only getting 52% of those referrals, or maybe only 45% of those referrals. So yes, they are that top referral partner, but they are not nearly in a position of prominence that they think that they are just based on anecdotal feedback. So really understanding that position with the referral sources today, and if there is room to grow. If you're at 45% or 52% of referrals received from one of your strongest partners, there is probably room to grow. If you're at 70%, 80%, 85%, you're not getting all of the referrals, but that room to grow may not exist, depending on why they're working with those other agencies. Is it a geographical coverage issue? Is it a specialty care issue? Is it a factor of the dynamics of your local healthcare community? So asking yourself that question, both where are we with those referral sources today, and then thinking carefully, is there room to grow, and answering that question before we think about expanding into new territory, whether that's new referral partners or new actual geographic territory. So part of that answering the question about if there is room to grow is understanding who else is receiving referrals from that particular referral source. You may think you know, and you may be right, but you may learn something by actually investigating the underlying data. And then within this conversation, beyond those top referral sources that are your primary partners today, where maybe you do have that 60, 70%, or you're in another position where you feel really strong given your role in that community, thinking about kind of who are those next relationships? Where do you maybe have good referral relationships, but you could move those relationships along the path to a stronger relationship? Maybe you're moving a good referral source to a great referral source, or maybe you've got referral sources that you do a little bit of business with, but you could move them up into that good category. And Cami, do you want to talk a little bit about this B to A, C to B concept more than what I just explained?
Sure. So really high level, we encourage everyone to rate their accounts. So any of the accounts that your business development team is working with, we encourage you to rate those accounts according to the admission history and rank them into A's, B's, and C's. And so that way you can set not only a frequency on how much you visit those accounts, but it gives you some targets as far as where you're going to see the most potential. And so, the A's are typically accounts that you have had the most admissions from, whether it's home health or hospice. And then the B's and C's, and we offer different thresholds for those, but you need to set those for your organization and what that really looks like to you. As opposed to, so many times I think business development reps and business development teams think of their A accounts as those people that they have good relationships with, and they really have no idea whether or not they've actually gotten referrals from them in the past year. So be sure to utilize that in order to have some strategies and targets going forward with those accounts. And again, when you have an account that you consider a B, and you decide that you're going to focus on that one account or several accounts, we usually recommend 5 to be your top 5 priorities for a quarter, then you can see the results from focusing on those accounts and help to drive your inspire you and drive you to do that again with other accounts as well. So.
And I like bringing it back to these A, B, and C concepts because, we talk about being in that top position with the referral sources. The fact of the matter is that most agencies aren't the #1 receiver of referrals, right? There are only so many of those within any community. And that doesn't negate the value of these ideas and thinking about where you sit relative to where you could sit with your referral partners and how you think about the level of investment that you make with those relationships in order to continue driving referrals. And then finally, where is the risk? And Cami is going to talk about where is the risk and how do you protect against it. But before we talk about that issue of risk, let's think about some of the data that really helps inform answering those questions. And I want to show you how we present this information within the market analysis platform, or MAP. One of our main goals with MAP is to make market intelligence, which we think is really important, really easy to get to and really easy to kind of follow a natural path of investigation and thinking about where we sit in a market, who are the referral sources, who are the competitors, how do we kind of investigate as those questions come to mind. And this here is an example of where we're looking at one particular hospital and a list of the home health agencies and the list of the hospices receiving the highest volume of referrals from that hospital. So one of the interesting things here as we compare those lists is that sometimes we can see relationships between the two lists. We can see, or we can infer some relationships between the hospital and the agencies involved. Sometimes those are pretty natural, like in the situation where we've got health systems or hospitals that have their own home health agencies and hospices, and you can see that relationship in the names, or about those relationships. But sometimes even in those tight relationship situations, the percentages don't play out quite the way that you would expect. So this can be helpful to see where are patients from that hospital or that medical group really receiving care once they get into the post-acute part of the process? What percentage of referrals are they receiving? How does that translate to volume? Who else is on that list? How close are they? And one of the interesting things can be, as in this situation where they have a quote stronger referral partner on the hospice side with 37% of the referrals going to a single hospice, than on the home health side with only 26% of those referrals. So that can inform our understanding of some of the dynamics at play and the different relationships within the market. And whether you are at the top of that list and wanting to increase your percent, or whether maybe you don't even show up on the top 10, but that's a relationship you would like to build, understanding who they work with today and how that might translate to thoughts about how you position yourself as a partner can be really valuable. The other thing that we look at is not just the relationships between one hospital or one physician group or one doctor and the home health and hospice agencies that that provider is working with, but what's going on in the community overall. So I know I've blurred the names here because it's kind of awkward. I think this is all data that we can show, but it's still kind of awkward to talk about individual providers just in case any of them are on the call. But what we've got going on here is looking at in columns, the hospitals that are referring patients to home health or hospice. And then in the rows, the home health or hospice agencies that are receiving those referrals. And looking at this in a broader view rather than focusing just on one hospital can help us identify patterns in the community. Like what we see here in this particular market is that the two hospitals discharging the highest volume of patients to home health or hospice, those first two columns, don't have a single partner receiving more than half of those referrals. Where the third and fourth hospital do, and it happens to be the same agency. So that agency that's partnered in receiving 86 or 78% of the referrals from hospitals number 3 and 4, communicating with those hospitals, you're unlikely to significantly disrupt that particular referral pattern, but you might position yourself as a good alternative when that agency is unable to receive the referrals. And maybe you're that first agency that they think of when the primary agency isn't available for whatever reason. Where when you're thinking about potentially forming relationships with those top two hospitals, that's a different conversation. They don't have that really tight partnership today. And maybe depending again on your goals and your situation as an agency, you are aiming to take away some of the market share from the top partners in that context. Regardless, understanding this data helps you really craft the right message and the right strategy, both in terms of who you're going to approach and how you're going to position your agency and how you're going to speak around how you have a stronger value proposition relative to the providers that they're working with today.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. So as we think about just this number one strategy of strengthening our current relationships, and we think about that previous slide and the agency that was in second position there that had the like 70-some% and 86% with those third and fourth hospitals. Those are the types of things that you want to think about proactively. And so when you look at this data and you look at your market share and you feel like, okay, we're number one, or even if we're not number one, but we've got the market share that we feel is appropriate for us within our market. And then we've looked at the relationships that we have with the hospitals, facilities, and physician groups, and we feel like proactively that we're in the place where we want to be. We need to make sure that we're constantly looking at that. And so I think we may see in some of our other examples that can so quickly change. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting that market share, we're protecting those relationships that we do already have. And if we think that we're in a point where our strategy for growth is going to be to strengthen those relationships. And so when we do that, again, knowing all of this data and monitoring it on a regular basis to make sure that, we're not missing any loss of market share. We're not surprised by a loss of market share. We're not surprised by an increase of market share by our competitors. We need to make sure that we have these strategies in place. And so knowing that data, knowing those competitors, making sure that we have an understanding of what their strategies are, especially if we're seeing them coming up with market share within those trended market share data charts that we have. But, again, not just sort of resting on our laurels if we haven't seen anybody increasing market share and we haven't lost any. Being proactive to make sure that those relationships that we have are good, that we're actually still presenting our true value proposition. They truly have an understanding. We all know we struggle with our agencies, with staffing, and so do all of our referral partners. And so do all of those, the new staff that's there, do they know your reputation? Do they know your value proposition? Do they know what differentiates you from all of those competitors? And making sure that they have that understanding. You can present it clearly and simply. All of your team, not just your business development team, but your clinical team. You need to be able to articulate it succinctly so that you can truly be that solution provider for them, and that if you're already there, you remain that way. Some of the things that we also look at as far as the markets go, the market data, is if there's a lot of shifting in position or market share in some of that trended market share that we look at, that's indicating a lack of loyalty to those agencies. And when you see that, all the more reason to be proactive with those relationships that you have already and that you've strategically decided to work on as far as growth goes within your own market. So the value proposition and how you're differentiated from your competitors makes you that solution provider. So many times I think, we feel like we are going out there and bugging people. But truly, you have the solutions that they need. You are their partner in care of those patients. And when you're the easy button, then that solidifies their view of you as that solution provider and true partner with them. I'll let you go to the next strategy.
Great. So let's talk about strategy number 2 and thinking about how we might pursue expansion efforts. Assuming that we felt really good about those primary partnerships, we maybe started to think about moving some of our B relationships to A and our C's to B. And we may decide that we have done what we can within our current space, and it's time to think about growing geographically or service line wise. In this particular part of the conversation, we focused on the right types of patients and the geographic focus, predominantly because of those 2023 pressures that we know are on our shoulders, particularly with the staffing shortage and with the cost pressures. So one thing that we've been working with clients a lot on right now is being thoughtful about a geographic focus. We've been working with a lot of organizations who are having to turn away patients in some of their service areas because they don't have the staff to go out and provide care to those patients. Well, they've got other areas where they do have a little bit of excess capacity. But as they're thinking about working with their referral partners and they're thinking about maybe growing those referral relationships, they aren't taking that geographic coverage into consideration, and they're continuing to pursue their entire service territory rather than focus on the service territory where they have capacity. So one of the things that we've been talking to folks about is focusing growth and sales and marketing efforts and their liaisons times on the areas and on the referral sources where they have patients in the geographic areas where they have staffing available. So that's both thinking about efficiently using clinical resources and our liaisons' time, our sales and marketing staff's time. We want to help them prioritize the areas where they're going to have the greatest positive impact on patients and on the agency overall. On the other side of this conversation is the types of referrals, thinking about this from two different perspectives. One is maybe less type and more volume, the potential volume, which is part overall volume, but also part your current competitors. So what we mean by this is, again, trying to create efficiency and maximize the use of your sales and marketing, your liaison staff's time. Let's focus their or prioritize their visits, their calls on those potential partners that have the highest potential volume to be sending to our agencies, which is part their overall volume, part understanding the relationships and what those referral patterns may look like today and how we think we could potentially fit into those tight or looser referral partnerships, but also part the current competitors. If we know a particular physician or medical group or hospital has a lot of patients going to an agency that we know we have strong value proposition relative to, that we differentiate ourselves in terms of quality of care or the way we engage with the referral source, that care transition process, that may be a stronger possible relationship than going to a hospital or medical group or physician who's currently got a lot of their patients being seen by competitors that are really strong, that it's harder to position yourself relative to them and harder to get patterns to change because we know that they're really successful in what they do. And maybe we target where we compete a little bit more easily. But part of this equation may be thinking about patient conditions, the type of care required, how you engage with the partners, whether that's hospitals, physicians, skilled nursing facilities. As the dynamics of healthcare continue to shift, there may be conversations with these different providers that are different than they have been in the past. And part of that may be understanding how they work with home health and hospice today. If we have some hospitals that are discharging a lower volume of patients to home health or hospice, particularly if they're maybe discharging more patients to skilled nursing facility or more patients home with no post-acute care at all, when they maybe could benefit from some post-acute care, or maybe they're having more patients die in the hospital, those dynamics can inform that conversation and think about how we position ourselves as a representative of the value of home health and hospice, as well as distinctive value-wise from other home health and hospice agencies. Versus those hospitals or physicians or skilled nursing facilities that already have a lot of patients going to home health and hospice. And in that case, it's less about the value of home health and hospice and more about why your agency versus who they're working with today. And maybe as you're thinking about the types of patients that you have the staff to cover, if you're a hospice, maybe that's around the specialty of the clinical staff that you have and the types of patients that they best provide care to. Or maybe as a home health agency, it's thinking about the clinical factors or the patient characteristics that influence PDGM payment and trying to drive institutional referrals, or really looking to build a rehab program or a cardiac program or whatever makes most sense for your agency. Focusing on referral management efforts on the types of patients can be part of this equation as well. So how do you find the areas of opportunity? It's going back to the basics of understanding what's going on today as the foundation, whether that's today within your current market and you're looking to expand those relationships within your current market, or whether you are thinking it's time to move a county over or a town over, or maybe across the state. Start with understanding who's operating in that space. What home health agencies and hospices would be your competitor? Which providers refer to home health and hospice today? Which maybe could be referring more patients to home health and hospice today? Where are their patients located? Does that align with where you have staff available? Or are you just building relationships only to have to say, sorry, we don't have anyone who can go out today because that's where your staff is already overextended? What do new markets look like? Again, who's operating in that space from both a competitive and a referral perspective? And also, is it a really dynamic market? Do we have things changing a lot? Do we have a couple of really big agencies that take up the bulk of care? Or do we have a lot of smaller agencies? Both of those, neither of those is necessarily the right or the wrong answer. It just changes the way that you approach work in that area. And where do other agencies, especially those that you can compete against, receive their referrals today? So if you have an agency that you win against, 7 times out of 8 or 9 times out of 10, or heck, even 7 out of 10 times, maybe you look at where they're getting their referrals today, and that might be a good source for expanding who you're working with. And then considering what types of referrals are best for your agency. Again, whether that's a geographic question or a type of patient condition or a type of referral source. So we talked about that kind of market penetration opportunity. This is an example where we break down by hospital where they're discharging their patients to today, how many patients are going home with no post-acute care, where hospitals are discharging a higher volume of patients to skilled nursing facilities, highlighted by those yellow cell colorings, what their total volume is over on the far right-hand side, how many patients are going to home health. We've got the green cell highlighting a higher rate of discharge to home health, and the green cell on the far right highlighting a hospital that discharges a higher volume of patients to hospice, versus those that are kind of in the average, or maybe those highlighted in yellow that have a lower rate of referral to home health or hospice than the national or market norm. So here are some examples of hospitals that may be underutilizing home health and hospice referrals. And again, maybe that conversation with them is more about why home health and hospice may be the best option for their patients, why no post-acute care may create challenges with readmission rates and patient experience and long-term patient recovery, or why skilled nursing facility may not be the optimal option for all those patients. Versus those hospitals that are already referring a lot of patients to home health and hospice. And with them, that conversation is, again, why you, rather than why post-acute care. We also like to show where patients receiving home health and hospice being discharged from certain hospitals are located, so that if you are pursuing a relationship with a new organization, you can see how their patient's location translates or relates to your service area. So if you were an agency looking at this particular hospital and you could see that most of those patients are right there in that Chicago area in Cook County, but you know that you are already overextended in that particular area, this might not be a relationship that is worth the investment. You might want to focus your attention on hospitals that are discharging a higher volume of patients to areas where you already have capacity. And then again, like in the earlier conversation, understanding exactly who they're referring to, who that competition is, what the distribution and the concentration looks like is an important part of the process. And when we think about exploring a new market, again, understanding who the competitors are, and if the market is fragmented, as we see here, where the largest agency in this particular space has only 5% market share, or it's concentrated, and I'll give you another example of that in just a moment. Is it changing a lot? Do we have a lot of movement among those top providers or even lower down the list? Are we seeing big shifts in market share, big changes in position? That tells us a little bit about the dynamics of a market and how ready they may be for a new entrant versus how kind of stuck in old patterns they might be. Although sometimes stuck in old patterns is a great opportunity because we can kind of disrupt the conversation. So having a really static set of referral numbers isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different set of information going into a space that you're unfamiliar with. And then who are the players? Who would you be competing against? Are they known or unknown entities? What else do you need to learn about them? And here's an example. Like, we see so many different versions of market share across the country, community by community. Here is one where it's super concentrated, right? We have 3 agencies that are capturing over 60% market share, where in the last example, we had nobody with more than 5%. And again, that's just a different approach to this market and thinking about how we prioritize our time. If we're thinking about where our competitors are getting referrals, we might want to examine if they tend to be focused on certain types of referrals broadly. So sometimes, as an example, I see that SNF piece of the pie be pretty big, and it tells me particularly about, I tend to see this where an agency has gained market share in the recent years. They might have a larger slice of that SNF pie than what we normally see. And that tells me that they may be looking to really build relationships with skilled nursing facilities versus focusing on kind of the more traditional physician or hospital referrals. And then we can also see through the market analysis platform or map where specifically are home health and hospice agencies receiving referrals. Which hospitals are they working with? Which physicians are they working with? And then when we think about the types of patients, we may decide we're targeting hospital referrals, or we're targeting physician referrals, or we're targeting trying to build out our rehab program. And in order to do that, it may be useful to see exactly which physicians are worth prioritizing on our list, or worth really learning more about and concentrating time on. And one of the ways that we may do that is by focusing on the physicians and their specialty and the volume of patients that they are referring to home health or hospice today. This is an example of within one community, the orthopedic surgeons, as you can see, who are referring patients to home health today, and what the referral source of those patients are. So a lot of these orthopedic physicians even have those patients going through the hospital prior to home health. So understanding this profile can help us focus on, identify and focus our efforts on those physicians who may be the best source of the types of referrals that we're really trying to drive as an agency. So I know we've talked a lot about MAP, the market analysis platform, in this conversation. I just wanted to take a moment to kind of step back from giving you specific examples and kind of case studies and tell you a little bit about where the application came from. It's been a collaboration between the analytics group at SimiTree and growth solutions, Cammy's group at SimiTree. It started really from working with clients who were trying to optimize their sales and marketing efforts, or who were looking to us for some guidance on strategic planning. And regardless of kind of the specifics of the client's goals, we would always start by pulling this market data to kind of understand that baseline and point them in some data-driven directions. And as we did this for more and more clients, we're like, heck, it might be nice if the clients could get to this data on their own, and even if they weren't working with us. So give access to more organizations. And that's really been our goal in developing this application that allows us to put this information into the hands of anyone. We really designed it to be used by busy people like you. We focused on the most critical information, presenting it in a way that's easy to identify the important patterns and the important observations that really drive decisions and prioritization. So we're trying to avoid having to download data and reformat and combine things and all that. We're just trying to make it super straightforward. And we pair it with guidance. I mean, it was built based on the expertise of people who have done this in the real world, like Cammy and Melinda and others in our growth team. And we have built out some of that expertise within our analytics team to provide some support to our clients as they use this information. And then they always have the option to extend working with our growth solutions for more customized and personalized guidance around strategies or best practices. Because really, when we think about success in the growth category, it's really based on three domains of investment. One is the data to drive decisions and making sure that you're not going off of hunches or anecdotal information, but you've got hard numbers to really be smart about where you're prioritizing your time. That's the market analysis platform. But equally important is developing a value proposition and being able to articulate it, making sure that you're implementing best practices and how you work with your referral partners. And that's where we get into the growth solutions side of our organization.
Yep, and that's where our growth solutions team at SimiTree can help you with those best practices in all of these different areas. We facilitate coaching and training and assessment of your situation and processes in order to help you meet and exceed those best practices in the business. So our team is happy to provide all of these things that we have here. And I'll put a quick plug in that we do have our highly acclaimed sales training going on open seating next week. If that's something that you need for your organization, as we talked about earlier, strengthening the current relationships that you have and maximizing that sales team. So if that's something that you need, that's available on the SimiTree website as well for next week. And truly making sure that all of the people that are involved in referral management and growth are collaborating and working together is what's going to make all of this, the growth, successful for you, as well as the overarching theme that we use from our growth solutions team in order to help you have the best referral and growth team that you can have.
At the end of the day, we're all in patient care. We're all in growing the organization, right?
Yeah.
We're all part of that broader equation. So just to kind of recap the thoughts for today, and you're thinking about prioritizing and using your resources effectively, the more you can be thoughtful about pursuing the right referral sources, understanding your competition so that you can really optimize the messaging to position yourself relative to that competition, and then ultimately objectively evaluating your options before investing, whether that's in current relationships or new relationships. Not because there's a wrong answer there. I'm not saying you shouldn't invest in any of those, but you've got limited time and money to invest in it. So where are you going to maximize the value for that investment? We have a couple of follow-up opportunities if you'd like to learn more about anything. Cami and I both would be happy to hear from you individually. I haven't seen any questions pop in, but I thought I saw something maybe about chat not working. So
we did get a
question. You pop back in.
Yeah, we did get a question asking if we work with startup agencies, and we absolutely do. So I don't know if Cami or Chris, you guys want to touch on that a little bit more.
Cami,
Yes. Sure. We can help with any of your, our whole consulting team can help with any of your needs, all the way from the growth needs to operations, compliance, any questions. We have many agencies that we've worked with for startups, and they're out there successful. So yeah, happy to do that.
I'm trying to think of a profile of an agency we haven't worked with over the years.
I know, right?
But it's so much fun. It's one of the things I love most about working for SimiTree is the breadth of expertise we can bring to our clients. Like, we've just got people who know it all, and it's so fun to be able to say, I've got somebody who can help you with that, and to have had experience with such a broad range of organizations, and to see that experience being successful in helping them do what they do. So
you can reach out to either Christy or I at these emails here, or there's a place on the website to reach out as well.
And then we also got a question if the data includes Medicare Advantage, VA, private insurance plans.
Good question. Right now, the data is Medicare fee-for-service patients, so traditional Medicare patients. We are looking to expand the data set, so we are working in that direction, but right now it is traditional Medicare patients.
Excellent. I think that is most of the questions, Christy, unless anybody has anything else. We really appreciate you guys joining us today. As Christy and Cami said, if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out via email. On the website, there's also a contact us form as well. So whatever's easiest for you, we would love to help you with whatever your needs may be, or whatever questions we can help you clarify. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Christy and Cami, for a great presentation.
Yeah, and have a great December, everyone.
Yes.
2023 will be here before we know it. So
happy December.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you all.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Missy.
take care.
Thanks, Cami.
Thanks, Christy and Missy.
Bye.